All right, let's bring in our guest, Albert Breer, Mr. Monday Morning Quarterback. As is always obligatory, I have to ask him about Ohio State right out of the gate. Breer, are you disappointed I didn't have the Buckeyes winning it all already?
Oh, who'd you have? So I was looking at my phone.
Oh, you weren't even paying attention. What are you, texting
I should have
people?
been paying attention. That's on me.
No. I had Ohio State.
I saw you had them in the top tier, though. I was paying attention for that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I think they're going to be very good, but I do think Penn State probably gets them this year. Clemson's loaded, and Alabama is a team I bet to win the Natty.
Okay, you bet Alabama?
Yeah.
All right, we'll see. I think Ohio State's one of those teams where I think we'll be a lot better in November than we are in September. 14 guys drafted. More than that made NFL rosters. It's a lot to replace. There's a question, of course, at quarterback. I think the game on Saturday is going to be a rock fight. I think both teams have excellent defenses that, from what I've heard, are way ahead of the offenses right now. But yeah, I mean, like the way that things are set up now where, you can have some bumps early and still survive to make the playoff. I think they'll be in good shape going into December.
Now, there's a rumor on a message board that you will be at the game this weekend. And I also saw you'll probably be in the locker room, maybe doing the coin toss or something like that because you're a royalty.
I won't be in the locker room, but I will be in the stadium. I do have access for that. I guess that's a big issue this week, right? Like I'll be okay. I'll be in the stadium. So it's I'm excited to get out there, man. It'll be my two sons' first game there with two, which is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Final college football. Got to ask about Arch Manning. I keep asking every guest this week, do we know if he's good? I mean, I'm enough with the UTSA highlights. Okay. Can we wait to see him live bullets against a good team with a smart defense?
Yeah. You know, what's interesting, actually, J-Mac, I asked around about him, going back to, like May, when you started to see him popping up as the number one overall pick in mock drafts. And, with all due respect to him, I can't remember that ever happening before, where you had a guy who has 2 college starts being projected in the next year's draft to that level. So, the guys who are on the ground who do the school calls and have been in Austin, would all say like the physical tools are there. He's a great kid. He's been raised right. So there are a lot of like great pieces to put together there. But I mean, I think the leap that everybody's making here is they assume that he's got all the stuff that Peyton and Eli had. And so they're making that leap where they say he's Peyton and Eli plus athleticism. And I don't know if that's really respectful to how difficult it is to see the game, to think the game the way that Peyton and Eli did. And that doesn't mean that Arch won't get there, but there's a process in getting there. Part of it is playing against better competition, which will happen on Saturday for him. Part of it is, when teams get 6, 7, 8 games of game tape on you, figuring out what you do well, what you don't do well. And now they're able to game plan more specifically. Can you counterpunch? There's still a lot that we have left to find out about Arch Manning. And I think he'd agree with this. Like as far as I've never talked to him before, but as far as what I know about the kid, I think he'd agree that there's still a lot left unknown about what he's going to be as a quarterback. And unfortunately, the way all this stuff works today, we're never going to give a kid like that the opportunity to just let that happen naturally, but you kind of wish that it could.
Yeah, no shot of that. All right, let's shift our focus to the NFL. Listen, I don't love talking about the Cowboys. They stink, right? They're the longest drought in a conference championship game in the NFC by a mile. And then you got Micah Parsons showing up at the airport. I'm going to get a second opinion on my back. His brother is tweeting out, this is going 12 rounds. I mean, at what point does this turn from circus to kind of like some Shakespearean act where it's really just sad and depressing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like a lot of this is kind of, what Jerry's invited over the last few years and the way he's handled a lot of these contract negotiations. The pacing of it actually isn't much different than the negotiation with Zach Martin 2 years ago, than the negotiation with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott last year, where, offers were made very early in the offseason. And then there was, basically radio silence. The team goes to California for camp. There's not much movement. And then at the very end, there's a push to get a deal done. Now, we'll see what happens and what results from that final push to get the deal done. But I'd say there are, a couple of key differences between this one and those. One certainly is, the public ranker that's sort of taken place over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, where a lot of this stuff has gotten out there and become kind of nasty in the public forum, whether it's between, Jerry and the agent, David Mulugeta, whether it's between Micah and the team itself. Obviously, there's the stuff at the stadium, that last preseason game with the nachos and lying on the training table. So this one's gotten more publicly nasty than those before it. The other difference is just kind of how these guys are seen in the locker room, and I would say, Dak and CD and Zach Martin were all beloved figures in the locker room. And I don't know that it's quite that way with Micah. Now, it doesn't have to be. He's a great player. He's a motivated player, and I think that if you pay him, he's going to be worth every penny. But that does add a different twist to the tenor of negotiations. And so I could see them getting a deal done in the next week. I could also see this, turning into something that drags into the season where, all of a sudden Micah Parsons' back is acting up, or his ankle is acting up. And you just kind of have this like weird sideways sort of season from one of your very best players, which of course can put the rest of the team in a tough spot too.
Yeah. At what point? I mean, Micah probably has a little more ammo to empty the clip. I mean, he could simply go on his own podcast and go off and shift the attention from Jerry. He could control the narrative. Jerry can meet the media as much as he wants. I mean, I know he's a billionaire and he's the owner. I think Micah has the leverage here. Let me get on the screen, Albert. We looked at the 2021 draft, all the best players in the first round. And Jamar Chase signed. Devontae Smith, extension. All these guys got their deals early. The Devontae Smith deal was done 17 months ago. Okay? Yep. There's one guy on the list who doesn't have a deal. Doesn't this even further ammo like Jerry doesn't know what the hell he's doing?
But again, like this is sort of the way that they've handled it. Like, and I think that's part of it is he does know what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like, and I think there's a piece of it, like for a lot of these owners, is keeping the money in your own pocket for as long as you can. And that could be an element here. It's control over workforce, which is something Jerry's talked about in the public forum, and in the private forum too of the ownership meetings.
Wait, hold on. But what do you mean?
One of the leaders of the pack when it comes to that stuff, and making sure that everybody knows who's in charge.
Oh,
and then I think there's also the entertainment aspect to it. And I a couple of years ago, I would have told you were crazy for saying these things. And I thought people were kind of off base when they did say it. But the more it's happened this way and the less aggressive that they've gotten about doing deals in the months of June and July, the more I've thought like maybe there is, a side benefit that he sees in this whole thing, that they're going to be in the A block in a lot of shows like this one, like that they're going to be the most important thing over the summer. I mean, will we really be talking about the Cowboys right now if it weren't for this?
No.
J-Mac?
No.
I mean, it's sort of, I don't know. I mean, that maybe because the coaching changed, but they didn't. I mean, all due respect to Brian Schottenheimer, this wasn't like a headline grabbing hire. Dak's coming back for another year. I don't know that there's anything that will capture the imagination of the public that's going on there right now. And so if you want to be a real conspiracy theorist about this, you could look at it and say, Jerry's going to get a deal done his way early, or you're going to have to wait until late. And the headlines may be part of the benefit for Jerry when it comes to all that.
Okay, so Albert, you're a smart guy. You've been in radio, TV, writing. You covered the league forever. Do you want to win headlines and be in the A block in July and August? Or do you want to be in playoff games that matter in January and get into the game in February?
Well, you know what my answer is.
Well, exactly. And that's the only reason I'm pushing back. Now, you said an interesting phrase. I almost didn't like it, where you said control over players. So are any other owners speaking in that tone, like that vibe? Hey, we got to let them know who's in charge. Or is that just a Jerry thing?
They all think that. I mean, like most of them think that way.
I get that.
I mean, if you want to know the truth of it, most of them think that way. I mean, that's why there are so many rules in the CBA that pertain to this sort of stuff, like whether it's franchise tags, it's strengthening the rules over holding out. I mean, guys have to pay, $50,000 a day for days they miss in training camp, and that's why players have had to get more creative in doing things like hold-ins. So, like, if you don't think your owner has that in the back of his head and how he can maintain control over his workforce, like, you are either rooting for one of the teams with a rare guy like that, or you have your head in the clouds about the way these guys operate. It's just the reality of it. You know what I mean? Like, so I think Jerry's a little bit more forceful about it, and Jerry's probably one of the more vocal guys inside the meeting room, but it exists everywhere, and it's all over the CBA. There's so many different things in the CBA that point to it, even the length of it. You know what I mean? Like, doing a 10-year deal where you have the opt-outs, like, what is that? That's control over workforce. So, I mean, I know that's sort of a corporate term for it, but it's exactly what it is.
Yeah, Jerry can go to the table and say, we have you for the next 3 years. You can't do anything, come play. And right. Honestly, I'm at the point, Breer, I'm not rich or wealthy. If I were a rich guy and I sided with Micah Parsons, I'd say, hey, Micah, I got you. I'll float some of your lifestyle. I don't want you going and playing. Get your contract. You deserve it. You've earned it, just like everybody else in your draft class. Go screw listening to him. I mean, again, maybe that's a little aggressive on my part, but
but that's the thing is, like, so what Jerry's told him is, like, we have you for the next 3 years. Well, why do they have him for the next 3 years?
Because
they have him for the next 3 years because they have the last year of his contract, franchise tag 1, franchise tag 2. And so those are mechanisms of control, and I mean, there are teams that are more aggressive so they don't have to use those mechanisms of control because they don't want it to come to that point with their players. In a lot of cases, you have a good relationship with your player, and you just don't want it to come to that. You may believe that you should have control over your workforce, but, the Eagles are a great example of it, like where you mentioned Devontae Smith, like, things never like came even close to coming to a head with him because you did him so early. AJ Brown, they revised his contract. They gave him a big bump when he had outplayed the contract he initially signed. So there are definitely ways to avoid it. There are definitely teams that don't want to exert it. Jerry's just never been afraid to exert these sorts of mechanisms. And again, like, that whole thing, like, I have you for the next 3 years, even though you're only under contract for the next year, is, of course, a pretty clear way of explaining to your player, like, even after your contract expires, I still have you because of the rules that we put in place.
I don't like that. I mean, maybe the WNBA players should talk to the NFL guys and be like, hey, you guys, this is the playbook. This is what we're going to do. But the other thing, looking at that, Rashawn Slater got a new contract July 27th. 2 weeks later, torn patella, out for the year. He doesn't have to worry about anything, Albert. He got his money. Right. Hey, don't rush back. We're good. You got your contract. We're happy. Like, Caleb
McGarry's another one. That's not as high profile, but he got hurt in Atlanta, I think, a few days after his contract. There are tons of examples of it for sure. Yeah. And that's part of the leverage that owners have, is fear that something like this is going to happen.
Yeah, so if I'm Micah, hey, man, I just saw what happened to McGarry, what happened to Slater. I'm sorry, I don't want to go out there. My back is hurt. Honestly, and you have to, if you're Dak Prescott, and you probably know him as well as anybody who covers teams, at some point he has to think, hey, man, I got paid. I don't care. We're not winning the Super Bowl. We're not sniffing it. I mean, I think the Eagles have a better chance to repeat than Dallas does even getting to the playoffs. And I think Dak is probably fine with that. Hey, I'm wealthy. I've got generational wealth. I got my girl. I got my kid. I'm fine. I don't care. At some point, you just have to not care. Because if the owner doesn't seem to care, why should the quarterback? I'm just going to go play and make money, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, but there's also, like, you only have so many years to maximize your time on the field, how you're going to be remembered and all of that different stuff. And I think, Dak's not really wired that way, where it's like, okay, like, well, like, my owner isn't as all in as I am, so I'm not going to put as much into it. Like, I have a hard time envisioning ever seeing anything like that happening with that particular guy. Like, Dak Prescott's not that way. But I would agree that, like, it doesn't always send the best message to your locker room when you're doing these sorts of things, I mean, I think in a lot of ways these contract negotiations send messages to the locker room. And I I think, for example, like Terry McLaurin in Washington, I think one of the tricky things about that one is, and was over the course of the last few months was like, I mean, if you're in a negotiation with somebody who isn't all that well liked or well respected in the locker room and there's a dispute, well, I think guys kind of, just look the other way on it. But if it's a guy like a McLaurin, like there are going to be guys in the locker room that are going to look at it and say like, you messed with that guy.
Ooh.
And now that they've paid him, they can point and say, you know what, we took care of him. Like it got a little messy, but in the end, we were able to find a solution, and he's happy and we're happy. And that's the kind of guy that we pay. So, I think more often than people realize, players keep score by contract. Mm-hmm. Players keep score by money. And so, they're paying attention to the way that you handle these sorts of negotiations, because they know if one of the biggest stars in the team can be treated a certain way, well, then they're certainly not going to be exempt from it.
All right, let's move off the Cowboys. I know management will love that. I do have to ask, I'm taking some heat in Chicago, Albert. Okay?
Yeah.
They're upset with me. Kyle Long is taking jabs at me. Like, this Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson stuff. Again, I'm listening to the quotes and I'm looking at the actions of Ben Johnson. And I'm just telling you, from my point of view, something's going on there. It doesn't feel like it's off to a good start. They've had like 4 or 5 months together. And the messaging from Ben, now maybe this is his personality. I don't know his upbringing. I don't know his background. It just doesn't seem positive. And then they signed Bajent to a random out of nowhere. This guy came out of nowhere. And they just signed him to a deal. I'm like, what is happening? So maybe talk Bears fans off the ledge or side with me, either one.
I think Ben's being intentionally tough on Caleb Williams. Like, I think that's really the long and short of it. And this is Ben being himself, and this is the way he coaches. And, as far as I can tell, like, Caleb's been on board with it, and it produced some really ugly days early in training camp. Like, it did not look good. But if you talk to Ben about it, what he would tell you is we were going through a process where we wanted to feed him through a fire hose and give him as much as we possibly could, overload him with information, overload him with scheme, and then come back and narrow down what he's doing and figure out what he does well and what he doesn't do well, throw the stuff that he doesn't do well out, and build an offense around his strengths. And so I think, like, you juxtapose the early days in camp against the second preseason game, and you see a guy who was playing much faster. You see a guy who's playing much more confidently because they had figured out exactly what he does best. They'd honed in on that, and then they really sort of fine-tuned some of the stuff as far as how fast he's playing, how quick the ball is getting out, all of that. And I know it didn't look quite the same against Kansas City. It wasn't quite as sharp against Kansas City in the last preseason game. But I think this has gone according to plan. And, we'll have to see what it looks like when the regular season starts. But I think people who've been around Ben would remind you, like, they had days like this with Jared Goff in training camp in Detroit. And nobody made as big a deal out of it because Goff was already a proven commodity. We already had an idea of what Goff is. We'll see if it works with the younger guy.
That's positive and upbeat, and I like it. I appreciate it. I do have to ask, Caleb kind of had the run of the show last year. He could do whatever he wanted. He was watching film by himself, reportedly. Well, guess what? The year prior at USC, he was also just doing his own thing. A lot of backyard football.
Right.
So 2 years of just, hey, freelance, make a play, go get us some points. How tough is it going to be to go from that into follow my lead, drop, read, react quickly? Like, it's probably at least a year with Ben before we see anything close to what he wants, right?
Well, it's a mentality change, I mean, you're trying to coach a playing style out of somebody, and that's not an easy thing to do. I think beyond just that, like in college, like he was asked in a lot of cases to be the best player on the field. And I think you saw that reflected in the way that he played. It was a lot of big play hunting, a lot of passing up the easy stuff. And what they're trying to teach him to do is play the game and play quarterback in a more between the lines sort of ways instead of constantly coloring outside the lines. you can run and scramble to create throws in the NFL. You can't do it all the time. And I think of Mahomes because I'm doing a story on Pat, and Pat and I talked about this, earlier in the month. Is like, if you look at his numbers, Mahomes' numbers, he averaged over 10 carries a game when he was at Texas Tech. That number for his NFL career is under 4 per game. And that's a very intentional thing. That for Mahomes was going from having to be the best player on the field on almost every play to I've got good teammates around me. I can trust them. I can get the ball in their hands. And then when I need to be Superman, I can always put the cape on. That's what they're trying to get Caleb to do in Chicago. Is there are going to be certain plays where we just want to have your hands at 10-2 on the wheel and just run the offense. And we know that we know that you're capable of the bigger stuff when we need it, but it can't be all the time. And I think there were points last year we saw what happens when he's trying to be that guy all the time. And they're trying to dial that back and say, just play quarterback 4 times out of 5. And then that 5th time, you can go and show everybody exactly what you're capable of.
Your analogy for Caleb got me thinking of the great movie Old School, where Will Ferrell, used to be a party animal. Then he's really resigned to the burbs, and his wife's like, "We don't want to see old Frank the Tank." And then he just comes out and he's beer bonging, or funneling, whatever the kids call it. Anyways, Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback, great stuff as always. Hey, good luck to your Buckeyes this weekend. I loaded up. I could use a new car, so let's go Buckeyes.
You got money on them?
Yeah, a couple bucks.
I like it.